This is Cadillac Unscripted on 107.9 CDY. Katie Huckle is away today. I will be running the show solo, and our special guest this morning is Marcus Peccia, Cadillac City Manager. Want to also, before we chat with Marcus, to mention that our sponsors are Independent Bank and Marianne Quist of Remax Central. And welcome, Marcus. How are you?
Good morning, Rich. It's great to see you this morning. Doing well. Looks like it's going to be another beautiful day in Cadillac, Michigan.
Let's talk a little bit about what's happening. I really hesitate. I don't even know how to begin because there's so much happening at the city level at Cadillac. But why don't you update us on some of the more interesting things that are going on, certainly from a perspective that people can see. Let's talk about Cadillac Lofts. What's the latest on that?
Well, thank you very much. And I think you hit the nail right on the head in terms of people being able to see something physically happening, something that's physically changing within our community. Cadillac Lofts is perhaps one of the largest examples of that to date. There is a brand new 4-story mixed-use development that's in the final phases of construction occurring right now in downtown Cadillac on the corner of Mitchell Street and Cass Street. What you see currently is one of 2 buildings. An identical building is in the processes of being planned for about a year or so from now to be built on the opposite corner, which would be Chapin and Mitchell Street. Each building has several thousand square feet of commercial space on the main level, followed by 3 floors above of residential space, 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, and studio apartments. Each unit or each building rather is capable of housing about, I think, 40 to 45 units approximately, give or take a couple of units here or there. And it's truly a public-private partnership between Michigan Community Capital, which is the ownership of the property and the developer, the state of Michigan, and the city. It's really neat to see how it's all coming together and being able to capitalize on grant monies from the state along with the private dollars from the development and incentives that the city's been able to offer to make this project come together. We believe it's going to add much-needed additional residential units to our community and specifically within our core downtown area, and also be able to add unique commercial spaces that currently don't exist as well today. In fact, as of right now, one of those spaces is currently going to be leased by Jimmy John's Sandwich Company. So that'll be a neat new offering that the community hasn't yet seen.
How important is it to have living space in a downtown area?
You know, there's a lot, Rich, that goes into creating what I would call an ecosystem or an environment that is helpful and beneficial to create economic growth and development. And more importantly, or just as important, I should say, to sustain economic growth and development and jobs. And part of that mix is making sure that you have a place for people to live that is walkable to your grocery store, your pharmacy, your bar, your restaurant, your movie theater, places for people to go and recreate. There are people at all stages of life, young and old alike, that have different needs depending upon their different situations. A lot of folks may not necessarily want that, detached single-family home on a quarter acre. They need something that's going to have, modern amenities and features that is, right off a highway interchange necessarily or close to a highway interchange, right in a core downtown where they can, walk up the sidewalk and basically be wherever they need to. And that's what this is going to be able to provide. It's going to be able to provide that space and directly inject right into essentially our central business district many new people, which we think is really a good recipe for success and long-term economic sustainability for the downtown area.
Is this kind of serving as a yardstick for other communities? Are we at the very beginning of maybe other communities doing something like this?
That is a really good question to ask, and absolutely true as well. Cadillac, in fact, was the sort of the first community in the bucket, or the first guinea pig moving forward with this type of development. Boyne City is in the process of going through their approvals, looking at getting a very similar project with the same developer as well. And there are a handful of others that are either starting in the ground right now or are also being essentially fabricated and put together as we speak across the state, all again for the purpose of doing several things, trying to get people that are looking sort of for that middle housing, that there's that housing gap in Cadillac, as there is in a lot of communities across our state, trying to fill that housing gap and doing it in a way where they're putting these types of mixed-use developments in what are commonly defined as traditional downtowns. So, it's sort of a traditional main street. You have places for people to go, whether it's, to buy clothes or to shop, to dine, to recreate, to have it in a walkable space. And Cadillac checked all those boxes. And so, this is really cool to see happen here. In fact, people have already started moving in over the last few weeks. They're doing it. Michigan Community Capital is doing it in a very diligent manner, so there isn't a big rush, being courteous, not just because of COVID-19, but also courteous to those that have already moved in, so that there's not a lot of disruption and commotion with people moving things in. But it's starting to get occupied as we speak.
And this is, as you mentioned, the first building. The second building obviously is going to be where G&D is now, because they're moving up the street a few blocks.
And we're very excited, by the way, to see G&D take the space that they've built. It looks beautiful. It's going to really help drive traffic, pedestrian traffic, and people to that new space as well. And part of the mix, Rich, in terms of the purpose of this development and why this partnership was created between the developer and the state and the city, is because the intent is to see how, if you put in a multi-million-dollar development to help fill that need, how it translates and spreads to all of the adjacent properties. At the end of the day, the name of the game is to try to not just sustain the value of property, but to increase it. When someone's property increases, then that does increase essentially their own financial stake in a very positive way. And so this pilot, if you will, even though it really isn't the pilot, but this first test, this first building, everyone anticipates seeing positive results.
You mentioned the living spaces, living quarters on the second, third, and fourth floors. First floor, how many businesses are there room for on the first floor?
That's a great question to ask. I want to say that there's approximately somewhere between 8,000 to 10,000 total square feet of commercial space. Now, as I say that, Jimmy John's is going to be filling a portion of that already. Mm-hmm. In terms of the remaining physical space, I don't believe that the developer has necessarily carved it out specifically with the intent of creating 2 more units or 3 more units. And so I do know that they are trying to find what they would define as the perfect match to fill that space. In fact, they're not even going to finish that space until they know who that perfect match may be, because they want to make sure that they're finishing it to the specifications that are going to meet the needs of whomever that tenant is. If there is, for instance, a diner of some sort that wants to move in, it's possible that they may take all of the available remaining space in building 1. Whereas at the same time, if they find a couple of smaller type uses that they believe would be good for that spot, then maybe they're going to subdivide the space 2 or 3 times as well to make it work.
So the space is essentially fluid then?
Yeah, fluid and flexible, and I believe that that's going to still be their intent with building 2 as well. So all residential units would start on the second floor.
So the second will be identical in size? Is that the plan?
That is the plan. There was what's called a Michigan Planned Unit Development Plan that was approved by the city, and certainly things in that plan may change. However, the layout of the buildings and the size and the scale of the buildings are very unlikely to change, and the second building is essentially a mirror image of the first one.
And the expected start on that, again, is when?
Undetermined.
Okay.
As I say that, though, the general idea is to get building 1 completely up and running, including all of the public improvements around the space. Those are improvements currently under construction right now along Mitchell Street, Shelby Street, and Cass Street. Once that's set, I believe they're probably going to be looking at a 2021 at the very earliest, likely a 2022 breaking ground date for starting building 2. Once building 2 is done, then there will be additional public infrastructure improvements along Chapin Street that are going to have to get done.
So this is going to be transformational for this parcel of land for the city of Cadillac.
Very much so. It's a very large parcel, and it's exciting to see that there are some other developments that are also occurring within the downtown area. There are some people that have property interests or ownership in property that are looking at possibly doing some special and unique things downtown. I'm not able to necessarily get into all of the details, but I can certainly say that there is, at least on the horizon, depending upon how the stars align and things come together, the possibility to see some adaptive reuse of 100-plus-year-old buildings that may turn into additional residential space and commercial space. So it's really an exciting time to be in Cadillac, and I think for as difficult as it is for me to communicate verbally, perhaps what I'm thinking is that by the time people see the buildings going up, by the time people see the dirt moving, it's years in the making. Mm-hmm. And so, as I sit here this morning, there are things that we've had conversations with other developers on, other potential projects that have been talked about now and sort of moved forward a little bit, over the last couple of years. Now whether something will actually turn into a real project, I still don't know. But if and when it does, that's the success almost. The ribbon cutting at the end is when you finally say, okay, it's beautiful, it's here. But, when you see them hit the dirt for the first time, breaking that ground, that's really when it's the culmination of all of the efforts and collaboration between the community and typically, the state of Michigan, sometimes even the federal government, depending upon what programs are being used, and the private, investment comes together, and we can celebrate.
We continue our conversation with Cadillac City Manager Marcus Peccia in just a moment on 107.9 CDY. Cadillac Unscripted is sponsored by Independent Bank and Marianne Quist of RE/MAX Central. Buying a home is still the great American dream. And yes, it can be an intimidating process, but you can rest assured and have confidence when the professionals from RE/MAX Central are in your corner to guide you through it. Marianne Quist of RE/MAX Central has helped hundreds of home buyers in and around the Cadillac area navigate the process over the years, and she's ready to help you too. From start to finish, from finding a home to submitting an offer, to understanding the purchase agreement, to inspections, surveys, and appraisals, to the time when you finally sit down and sign those closing documents, Marianne will be there. When you're ready to buy, talk to Marianne Quist at RE/MAX Central. See her listings at teamquist.com. We continue our Cadillac Unscripted conversation with Cadillac City Manager Marcus Peccia. Cadillac Unscripted is sponsored on 107.9 CDY by Marianne Quist of Remax Central and Independent Bank. Let's switch gears here, Marcus, and talk a little bit about city finances. Pandemic came and hit us like a shovel over the side of the head in the middle of March. And it's still here, and it's going to be here for a while. How did the city weather the storm over the last 7 months?
Well, I can tell you, I've been in public service now for over 20 years. I've been serving as Cadillac City Manager for 10 plus years. It'll be 11 years in November, and honestly, it feels like I just got here the other day. I cannot believe how fast time flies. I have never experienced anything like this at all. The closest thing that comes to my mind was September 11th, when the terrorist attacks occurred in New York City and the whole world stopped. Mm-hmm. And it was that sort of feeling that was reminiscent when the government, not just in our country, but governments across the globe, started essentially closing things down because of an unseen illness, unseen disease. And, we're not out of it yet. We're still working through it, and, like it, love it, hate it, all of the legal challenges and things that are happening, the virus doesn't care. And so, we're doing everything that we can to be courteous and to be smart and to be diligent while respecting people's own personal opinions on their feelings about the virus. But the reality is that the only information we have is that information that's being given to us from our government and from the CDC, from the health department, through the, I guess I'll call it planning and almost overnight creation of programs to make sure that agencies such as municipalities can continue to provide the much needed services to keep operations running. Cadillac has, as of this moment, been able to weather the COVID-19 storm very well. Cadillac has a long and proud history of being very fiscally conservative. We have a fiscal retention policy of holding on to approximately 15% of our general fund revenues. Our general fund revenues, Rich, are revenues that we collect from people that pay property taxes. And our policy is to hold on to minimally 15% of that, essentially as a rainy day fund. Historically, we hold on to 20%, 25%, and it fluctuates. It does fluctuate, but we always hold on to more than that. Given our incredible fiscal conservative approach once COVID-19 hit and things started to slow down, coupled with the federal programs that were passed through down to local municipalities through the state of Michigan, we've been successful in getting a variety of grants, such as a reimbursement for a couple of months of payroll for all of our police and fire related payroll expenses. We've been able to achieve additional savings through the adoption of a COVID-19 fiscal response plan by not moving forward with things that were not absolutely mission critical in terms of acquisition of equipment. We are now at approximately 40% fund balance, and so I can tell you that's really high. However, given that there's still a lot of unknowns, I would much rather be sitting at a 40% level, which is, again, really high, versus being at the bare minimum level. So I can't sit here and tell you that we're going to come out unscathed. because I don't know, and anyone that you may ask that question to would likely give you that same answer. But I can tell you that Cadillac is currently positioned in a very good place. And I think that with the strong, diligent leadership of our city council and of my executive team here with the city, we're going to be okay as we continue to manage through this very unique period of time that we're all going through.
Once in a 100-year occurrence, right?
Yeah, or even longer.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in the 10 minutes that we have left, I'd like to shift gears and talk about the medicinal marijuana and recreational marijuana application process at the city of Cadillac. I know there are some people who wish it would just go away, but it's always been my view that if it's legal, you might just as well profit off of it. So where does that stand, and can you give us an update on that?
Well, that is really a good question, and that similar to what we were talking about earlier in terms of seeing, construction projects, development projects, physically seeing them happen, about how there's typically a lot of time and work spent in the background that leads up to that. That's the same thing with this here. Cadillac had been discussing off and on for several years whether or not essentially to get into the mix with offering the ability for companies to establish marijuana-based facilities here in the community. At first, the policy of the city was to not do anything until the question was answered at the state level about whether or not recreational marijuana was going to be allowed or not allowed. And we had essentially just kind of hit the brakes. We opted out, or excuse me, we didn't opt out. You didn't have to opt in. So we chose to remain opted out of all marijuana-related things, which at the time was just medical. After the voters of the state of Michigan approved the referendum vote to legalize recreational-based or adult-use-based marijuana, we then started to take another look at it. And we also looked at how people within the city voted. And although the majority of residents of Wexford County voted against the legalization of adult-use marijuana, a majority of voters within the city limits voted in favor of legalizing recreational or adult-use marijuana.
Isn't that interesting that your opinion is largely based on where you live? It's interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. And, the city council publicly, talked about that. In fact, they still do from time to time when it comes up because, ultimately they're elected to represent the majority. Now, while in order to get on the council, they have to be essentially nominated by those that live within the same ward that they live in, but ultimately they're all elected at large. Mm-hmm. And I think that resonates with the board, that ultimately their voters, the people that live in the community, said this is something that we're okay with. And I'm sort of skipping ahead a bit, but over the period of time before that happened, and then even after the adult use vote was approved, the city did a number of things. We did some unscientific surveying. We at one point had just an open town hall type meeting in the high school auditorium. Interestingly enough, most of the people that showed up were actually from the Flint area, weren't even from the Cadillac area, which I don't know if that was a sign or not. We had several public hearings. And so, we did everything we could. We even sent a survey link in a letter to everyone that pays a utility bill in the city. So, not just residents that lay their heads on beds at night, but people that own property in the city. We wanted to know. So we figured the best way to reach out would be we're going to put it in the utility bill. What do you think? Tell us what you think. And so, at the end of the day, the council decided to take what I would characterize as a very conservative approach. There are, and I'm gonna get the number wrong, but let's just say that there's 10 different license categories, approximately, under adult use, and the same under medical. One of those categories under each classification is for like a retail type establishment, for a store. So what the city council did was they said, okay, we'll be okay issuing 2 licenses to 2 retail type stores for medical marijuana and 2 licenses for 2 retail type stores for adult use or recreational marijuana, and 1 license for every other category. And the other categories are categories like for growing operations and processing laboratory type operations, transporter type operations, and the like. More or less remanded to the industrial areas of the community. We began the process quite a while ago. COVID-19 pumped the brakes and paused everything. However, at this point in time, the city has conditionally licensed 4 companies, 2 that want to sell medical marijuana out of a retail type shop, and 2 that would like to do the same out of a adult use type shop. We had not received any applications for any of the other license uses. Whether or not we'll still receive those applications is yet to be determined. We'll be re-advertising their availability at some point, probably later this winter. But at this point, in terms of where we are right now, we have 4 applicants. They have conditional licenses from us. They're going to be going through an administrative review process for the sites that they've picked out. They'll be in front of the Planning Commission asking for a special use permit, which is required. And then the final step will be getting their final, essentially, sign-off by the state of Michigan. So in terms of when we'll be seeing really any activity happening, I couldn't tell you precisely. I'm guessing at the earliest it'll be later this fall, probably early this winter. And I think in terms of any major construction-related activity, you're probably not going to see anything until next spring. Was there an intentional thought as to where they would locate? Intentional, I would probably say no, in terms of how they were selected. Mm-hmm. However, intentional in terms of where they would locate.
I was talking about physical location.
Yeah,
looking at trying to separate them by.
So the answer is yes and no. Okay. Yes, from the perspective of before we even advertised the availability of the licenses, we had public hearings and creation of ordinances that was approved by our Planning Commission and City Council that established the proper zoning. That's the physical location for where these types of uses should be permitted within our community. And so based on then the zoning, we said, okay, people come and apply. It was up to them to figure out where within the zones they could go. Mm-hmm. So that intentional establishment of the where was created by the public bodies before we started going through the application process. And when we went through the application review process, certainly, the amount of investment and how it would flow and work was a part of that dialogue with the selection committee. But the overall general concept of the where was already answered or addressed, because if they were asking to go into a place that wasn't approved by zoning, it would have been a no on immediately.
Right.
So
okay, couple minutes left. You just mentioned you are heading into the 11th year on the job in the city of Cadillac?
Yes.
Proudest accomplishment?
Seeing this community grow and grow collaboratively. There's a lot going on, as we talked about. There's a tremendous amount of collaboration that occurs, perhaps not in a very public way, between people from private citizens, corporations, and industries located in and outside of the city, the state of Michigan, our philanthropic groups and our service clubs. People come together in this community. We don't always agree on everything. We're not always happy about everything, but at the end of the day, we all come together because our hearts are in the right place. We know it's about community first, and the things that we can accomplish when we work together, honestly, the sky's the limit. And so my proudest moment, in a sense, is just being able to be a part of that. Is very satisfying, and it frankly, it's something that any city manager, I think, would be envious of. Being able to be in a community where people can have a conversation, try to work towards a common good, a common goal. There's politics everywhere you go, but being able to keep your eye on the ball, in a sense, and it's really incredible. Seeing Cadillac Commons develop in all the public places is really special. Seeing the industrial growth and development happening as well, that may not be as publicly transparent, but it's still happening. Seeing the retention of jobs, that's where it's all at as well. I mean, it's incredible.
If a community does not have jobs to offer, there really isn't much left.
Yeah, I mean, you need something that creates the pulse of the community.
All right.
So,
Marcus Peccia, Cadillac City Manager, our guest this morning on Cadillac Unscripted. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Cadillac Unscripted is sponsored by Independent Bank as well as Marianne Quist of Remax Central. Join us next week, same time, same station, for some more local chat on 107.9 CDY.